So let revival start right now. Let the Spirit of God break out as we worship you now. This is a holy moment, and let what's dead come to life right now. Every chain fall off right now as we worship you now. This is a holy moment. They thought they were finished, the seas were in their face, but you created walkways out of the waves. They thought they were captive, so they began to praise. You opened the doors and broke every chain. Yeah, you opened the doors and broke every chain. And in a moment, everything can change. In a moment, miracles are made. There is power when we praise your name. In the holy moment, everything can change. Everything can change. I thought it was over, held hostage to my shame, but you take every graveyard and turn it to grace. And now I live in freedom, I'm walking in your light, and I will sing a new song of how you brought me to life. Yes, I will sing a new song of how you brought me to life. And in a moment, everything can change. In a moment, miracles are made. There is power when we praise your name. In the holy moment, everything can change. In the holy moment, everything as we worship you now. This is a holy moment. Yeah. Let one step come to life right now. Every chain fall off right now as we worship you now. This is a holy moment. This is holy. This is holy.
Context when studying the Bible is critical. In fact, context when understanding any idea is critical. I heard about a daughter who loved her mother. Last week was Mother's Day. I still love all the moms and grandmas in the room. Well done, Mom and Grandma. This daughter loved her mother, and she had an assignment to draw a picture of your mother in school. And so she drew a picture of her mother, and she entitled the picture, "I Want to Be Like My Mother." And a week after the assignment, the mother was looking through the homework, and she found the picture that her daughter had drawn of her and handed in for the assignment at school. Here is the picture. Give me your first impression of what's going on in this drawing. When I grow up, I want to be like mommy. The horrified mother wrote the teacher and said, "You have to understand what was going on here. I work at Home Depot. There was a freak snowstorm. Everyone rushed in the store to buy shovels. We only had one shovel left, and I told my daughter that everyone was throwing cash at me to get, that is not a pole, it's a shovel, people." Get that off the screen, that's too disturbing. Turn to your neighbor and say, context is critical. We are going to study a passage today that is one of the most wildly misinterpreted and misapplied passages in the Bible. It is also one of the most famous passages in the Bible. It is also one of the best known passages. It's the trifecta, and because it's so well known and so famous and so often misinterpreted, and because the actual interpretation is so important, we've got to get the context right. All right, let's go ahead and look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, a little bit of the context here. He says, "For I tell you," this is the whole crowd, this is a Sermon on the Mount, the day God talked about everything, big, huge multitude of people are gathered around. Jesus is sitting in the seat like Moses. He's on the mountain just the way the Jewish mind imagines Moses giving the 10 Commandments. He says, "I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." It's just, I mean, I've said this before, I'll say it again. When you're reading this stuff, you got to put yourself in the audience and listen to the sounds in your mind. When Jesus said, if you're not better than a Pharisee, there was a gasp. Why? Because the Pharisees were the most zealous. And when he says you got to be better than the teachers of the law, there was a gasp. Why? Because the teachers of the law were the most educated, the most well-known, and the most powerful. So he said, you have to be better than the most zealous and the most powerful people you know, or you can't get into heaven. What does it mean to be more powerful or more righteous than these people? Well, then he goes on to teach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to get the 6th one tonight, ways that the righteousness of the most zealous and most powerful religious people of their time fell short. One was unchecked anger and insult. Jesus teaches against it. It's not just good enough to go around your whole life and not murder anyone. If you harbor anger in your life and you insult others, you have murdered in a way that is damaging to their psychology, to their person, to their reputation. Then he teaches against putting offerings over reconciliation. In other words, he says that you can't prioritize religious ritual over human relationship. You got to go make relationship right. All the ritual in the world is not as important as reconciliation. And then he has 2 that are directed right at men. Women, for this little part of the sermon, you don't even have to listen to it, because both these, in the context, it's right for women. You take a 3-minute break right now while I talk about this and just get on Wayfair for a second. But anyway, he says, men, you Pharisees and teachers of the law have a lustful regard for women. And you might get to the end of your life and say, I never committed adultery, but in your heart, that lustful view, looking at God's creation, a female, in that one-dimensional, objectifying way, is a righteousness that God cannot tolerate. And then also issuing frivolous divorce. This is basically the endangering of women at a time in their culture where it was very vulnerable for a woman to receive a frivolous divorce. And then the last one was what we taught last week. Go back and listen to this lesson. Manipulative oaths. Not being a straightforward, simple person of your word. The biggest criticism that Christians get is that we're hypocrites. We say one thing and do another, and Jesus strikes at the heart of this. So he says, listen, just because they have the position, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, it doesn't mean that there isn't a problem with their heart. It's a problem of anger, and it's a problem of not lacking reconciliation, how you regard women and what you do with divorce, and what your word is and what your word isn't. And then he sums it all together in this final accusation about enemies. I had a lot of enemies growing up. I mean, I grew up in this wonderful little town. I had really good parents. I had an idyllic youth, but like a lot of youth, there's just some rough spots. I'll call the rough spots. I was from 0 to today. It was right in there. That's funny. That was funny. You were very slow on laughing at that. No, it was really actually when I hit adolescence. Adolescence, late elementary school through the beginning of high school, man, I had enemies. You know what my number one enemy was during that period? Math. Math was an enemy. It was, and just functioning in the classroom environment for whatever reason, man. I remember one time we had this horrible parent-teacher conference, and my mom just went after my teacher, and she just got up in her grill and just told her what for. And I was like, the whole time I was like, yeah, Mom, get her. And then we got in the car, and my mom was like, you think that teacher got it? And man, I'm telling you what, from there all the way home, I got it 7 times harder than that teacher got. And I'm like, this is miserable. I can't win one way or the other way. And it wasn't just the teacher, it was the students. A lot of times I felt at odds with the students, how to get some social footing, how to make the team, how to be popular. Would anyone go out on a date with me? I remember I went out for sports. It never worked. The coach at baseball, he said, Kurt, I want you to get out and left. And I would run out there. He says, further left. And then I ended up playing left out a lot. You're warming up a little, but I'm still disappointed. This is prime material. I've used this material in other environments and it worked better. The point that I'm trying to make is I didn't have the Roman occupation. That's what Jesus is talking about. I didn't have the influence of Greek culture corrupting my Jewish culture. My enemies were much smaller than the enemies Jesus is talking about in this passage, but to a 14, 15-year-old boy, it didn't seem that way. And you have to understand, when I first encountered Matthew chapter 5 on my bed as an adolescent in small town Omak, and I read Jesus saying, I got to give my enemies what they ask, and even more than they ask, and I got to let them hit me on the other side of the face. And if they want to borrow something, I got to just give it to them. It drew me to Jesus. And it scared me. It was the minute in my life where I first started feeling disappointment and bitterness that my biological father left. In that same season, there's a lot of years where I didn't really even think about my biological father that much. But in that same season where I started to mature and figure out why did they divorce? Why did he leave? Why doesn't he want to be with me? Why do I hardly ever hear from him? In that same season, I encountered this passage. And Jesus says, how you treat an enemy, well, it tells me everything about you. How you treat an enemy tells me about your anger and reconciliation and your regard for others and whether you're a person of your word. The ultimate indication if you are a child of mine, literally what the passage is about to tell us, is what you do with that father that disappointed you, or that friend that rejected you, or that teacher that hurt you, that person who opposed you. Matthew 5, 38 through 48. Just 10 verses. If you're still with me, give me an amen. We're going to go verse by verse, and I got 2 application thoughts for you. Verse 38. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So we've all heard this, right? So it's from the Old Testament. It's from the book of Exodus. And we kind of, in our common parlance, it means if someone does violence, you can do violence back to them. This is not what it meant in the Old Testament. What it meant in the Old Testament is if an injustice happens to you, do not accelerate it and do more injustice. So someone takes your eye, don't take 2 eyes. And by the way, if you think about what happens in culture, this is what happens in culture. If someone hurts us, they hurt one member of our family, and we go hurt every member of their family. And then they go, you hurt every member of my family, so they hurt every member of our tribe. So then our tribe goes and we hurt every member of their country. So this Exodus thing is meant to be a decelerator. No, 1 eye for 1 eye. So Jesus says, you have heard it said. This is the oral tradition. This is what ends up being a thing called the Talmud. So what the oral tradition is, we have the Old Testament law, and we have some prime rabbis that are very good at teaching. They teach, and we memorize what they teach. So we're memorizing the comments on the actual passages. So he said, these guys have taught you this, but I'm going to tell you exactly what this really means. He says, you have heard an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist. The word resist there is a pretty strong verb. It means don't get violent with an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, circle the word right there, turn to them the other cheek. Kevin Thompson, come out here. Kevin Thompson is going to be my sparring partner, and we are going to figure out the context for this because we love this passage and we also hate it because this passage does 2 things to us. First of all, it has a profound moral impact on us. Oh my gosh, love the enemies. What a high standard. Jesus is brilliant. Then the very time when we think that, we go, what in the world is he talking about? Is Jesus advocating for the merciless beating of others, and we just got to stand there and take it and be walked all over? Well, neither is right. The actual middle ground is more true. So, first of all, let's talk to the lefties in the room. Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
We're good. Why whenever the text says evil person, am I the first person that came to mind? It's my question.
Corbin refused, that's why. It is true. Okay, where's my lefties? Where's all my lefties? All right, this has nothing to do with you. You see, it's only right-handed here. So only right-handed slaps are given in the Near East, and it's the same reason that nowadays we only shake with right hands. Even if you're left-handed, we shake with right hands. And why is it that we only shake with right hands, and we're only talking about right-handed blows here? We're only talking about right-handed slaps. There's no left-handed slaps. There's no left-handed cheeks. Why are we talking about that? Because in the Near East at the time of Christ, and for many eons before and after that, how do I say this? Your left hand has special responsibilities.
To hold microphones?
No, for cleanliness issues. That's it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not Mark Clark. All right. So it's only right-handed, right? So if someone strikes you on the right cheek, so the only way to strike Kevin on the right cheek is a backhand blow. This is the right cheek, correct? A backhand blow means that I am your master and you are my servant or slave, or it means I am a citizen and you are a non-citizen. If I hit you with a backhand on your right cheek, I am not only injuring you, but I am telling everyone around I am superior to you. You are inferior, I am greater. So Jesus is saying, this is very important, if anyone hits you in the right cheek, this is what you're supposed to do. Now, let's be really clear about one other contextual thing. This is not a brawl. This is not a fight. This is not geopolitics. It's 2 individuals. If this was a brawl, if you were getting into an MMA fight, Jesus would have said, if anyone comes up to you and they hit you to the solar plexus or they hit you to the chin, this is not a fight. What this is a personal injury and disgrace situation. When you are humiliated, this is what you should do. This is what Jesus is teaching. He's teaching about humiliation. When they try to humiliate you, you should, if they hit you on the cheek, do what, Kevin? Turn the other cheek. Why? Because now, if I want to strike you, I only have 2 choices. I can punch you or I can slap you. Both of those indicate that we're equals. So Jesus is not saying, just beat me up. And Jesus is not saying, I'm just passive. And Jesus is not saying, what he's saying is, You turn the other cheek and you stand your ground. You do not accelerate the violence. You do not tolerate the violence. You do not accelerate the humiliation. You do not tolerate the humiliation. You win the humiliator. You stand your ground. So what's going on here is, Keller says this, by the way. We lost Dr. Tim Keller this week. It's just a tragedy, one of my biggest heroes. He's genius on this. Go listen to his sermon on this. But one of the things Keller will say is, Jesus is teaching us to respond to personal humiliation in the way that the human heart never wants to respond. The human heart wants to respond in many different sinful ways. I'll go through the 4 biggest personality types, and I'll show you how we want to respond. So we're going to switch roles. Kevin's now going to slap me. Remember how nice I was, Kevin? Remember how slow I was? I remember. Slow motion. I remember. Okay. So the first personality type, why are you enjoying this so much?
I can't wait.
The first personality type goes to hit me on the right cheek, and I grab it, and I punch him right in the nose. Before he hits me, I attack before. How many know this kid? How many have this kid in your family? Like, you even look at me, boom, I'm punching you. Here's the second one.
That was my sister.
Yes. Mommy, he hit me. Mommy, he hit me, Mom. They become the victim, and they run, and they go grab the mom. I used to go to my mom and say, Gary hit me. And she'd say, you go tell him not to. That's the second type. The third type is this one. You see, who's got this kid? Who's got this kid? Didn't hurt. What was that, a fly? You're not hurting me at all. And this is the one, and they act all like under control, and you're not getting to them. But then when they do break, full serial killer. I mean, they just go nuts. Like calm, war, okay? And then here's the last one. Yeah, I probably deserve that. You probably are better than me. I probably deserve that. Do you see the beauty, the brilliance of Jesus? He's saying, no, you don't deserve that. But no, you're not going to add to it either. Give it up for Pastor Kevin. Tell him thanks for coming out here. Keller talks about a grown lady that he hears on a conversation in the airport. He overhears her on a conversation. So she's a grown adult, and she's talking to her father. And she says, Dad, I've told you before, you cannot speak to me this way, and you cannot speak to my mother this way. Therefore, I'm hanging up this call right now. I'm going to call you back in an hour and see if you have a more reasonable mind. I love you. I want to be in a good relationship with you, but I will not tolerate this sort of talking. That's turning the other cheek. She doesn't cut the relationship off. She doesn't blow up back at him. She doesn't talk back to him the way he was talking in that destructive knowledge. She holds out redemption. She wants to win him. She will not compromise what is wrong. That's turning the other cheek. I'm made in the image of God. You are not allowed to put me in the place of the inferior. We are both sinners. Let's go ahead and keep going. Verse 40. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. Every lawyer just flips out on that verse. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Okay, there was a rule that any Jewish boy 12 years old or man 12 years old or older had to carry a Roman guard's parcel for 1 mile if the Roman guard asked him. So Jesus is making the same exact point here. He's saying, annoy the victimizer by being the better person. He's saying, respond in the opposite spirit. Go beyond what they expect and show them that you're the better person. Give to the one who asks you and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I got to stop right there. He's looking right at the Pharisees when he's saying, you have been taught that it's okay to hate. Let me just say this very, very clearly. In our politics, in our personal lives, in our families, it is okay to hate sin. It is never okay to hate sinners. We've got to be very clear about this because it's the same problem that happens in humans all the time. Who were the Pharisees? They were the anti-Hellenizers, okay? They saw the Greek invasion of culture as corrupting Jewish culture. And they had an argument. The Greeks were very persuasive and very popular. They were just like America's Hollywood. It went all the way over every culture and it changes things. And they were very resistant. And they read the Old Testament. They said the Old Testament tells us to stay away from false gods and to stay away from false idols and to protect ourselves from that. But they just made one mistake. They mistook staying away from the lies and the deceptions and the contrary from staying away from the people. God never commanded, you read your Old Testament, God throws his arms wide open to the nations and says, come to me. The entire plan of the Old Testament. Okay, Jesus gets angry one time. He makes a whip and he goes into the temple courts and he starts kicking the tables down. We usually only talk about this at Christmas and Easter. You remember this passage? Where is Jesus kicking those tables down? What part of the temple is he in? Why is Jesus so mad? Yes, Jesus is mad when people are overcharged and usury and all that. But his prime motivation for being mad at those tables, exchanging money in the temples, they were set up in the Gentile court. They were set up in the part of the temple that was meant for the nations to come and experience God. The people are not the problem. And when we start thinking that the answer to our world is Amishism, segregation, isolation, why do we have breakaway? No one likes taking second offerings around here. I'd rather just start preaching the Bible. But why do we do it? I'll tell you why we do it. Because last year during breakaway, a kid walked right on this campus, looked at the 3 crosses out there and said, this is an interesting place. Why do they have 3 plus signs? Where's the division signs? I'm glad that kid's here, don't you? Aren't you glad that kid's here? This is what they're teaching wrong. You have heard, hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. People that pray for those that persecute him indicate they are true children of God. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. In other words, God treats lots of different types of people, those that are close to him and far from him, with blessing and grace. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are you not even the tax collectors doing this? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? This is like me. All day long, I eat healthy, just all vegetables all day long. And I lecture other people in my life about the fiber content and sodium content of their food. And I look at them and go, you sure you want to eat that? I don't know. And then I go home and I eat tortilla chips. You can't be an expert on nutrition when you're gorging on tortilla chips. Anyone can know the fiber content. It's actually not eating so much guacamole. Okay, I gotta get off that. Let's go. And then he ends with this beautiful little idea that I'll come back to at the end. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Okay, why master this material? Why look at this? Why take this most powerful, might be the most powerful thing Jesus teaches about morality? Love your enemies. And I'll tell you really right. Here's the reason why you should learn this lesson. Here's the reason why, whether you're 80 or 8, you should settle this issue in your heart. It is really bad for you to hate your enemies. I didn't say it's really bad. It is that. I said it's bad for you. And it's really, really good for you to fully embrace the challenge of stepping over all of the offense and humiliation and challenge and difficulty and loving those that have not earned or deserve your love. It is so good for you. I just love the places in the Bible, and it's all of them, where the science ends up backing up what the Bible's been teaching. According to the study published in the Journal of Health for Psychology, greater lifetime stress severity and lower levels of forgiveness each uniquely predicted worse mental and physical health. You like the way scientists write things so unclearly? What this means is, if you don't love your enemies, you're gonna go crazy and be worried all the time. This is what the psychology teaches us. The study showed that developing a more forgiving coping style may help minimize stress-related disorders. This is just like going for a walk. You know, there's some days you're laying in the house and you're like, I should get up. I've been sitting at this desk. I've been laying on, watching the show. I should go for a walk. And you don't want to get up because at my age, just getting up, that is the exercise. Like sometimes you just stand up, you're like, and rest. You know, that was the rep. Right? But you get outside and it's one of those Northern California evenings. Does anyone know what I'm talking about here? And you're like, praise God, this is pretty good. And then you walk into a little bit wilder area. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're out for a walk and all of a sudden you get into a grove of pine trees. I grew up in an area with pine trees. Does anyone you get invigorated by that pine? The pine smell gets in you and you're just like, I start getting close to God. And then the next thing you know, you are walking and you got the pine smell and there's a little creek there and fish start rising and magically you have a fly fishing and you are catching fish. You started out going, I wonder if I should take a walk. This is gonna be hard. And you end up going, man, this just gave life to me. This is what it's like to open our hearts wide to this challenging idea that even the people that have caused us the most pain, we should love. Here's the standard of Jesus, and it's difficult, and I just got two thoughts for you. One is answer evil with good. Answer evil. It seems so obvious. But by the way, this means you answer evil with good. He's not talking about, nations and police states. A lot of people have taken this verse and said there should be no police and all Christians should be pacifists and there should be no armies. He's not talking about that. He's not talking about that at all. There are other passages that talk about that we could examine. This is a you. See, when we do all that geopolitical stuff and what should governments do and police officers do and all that, what we do is we escape our own personal responsibility. He's talking about how will you respond when something evil happens to you. When I first came to California, we went to Cal State Stanislaus in Turlock, California. I didn't know what I was doing. I barely know what I'm doing now. I knew nothing then. And we started this little group, and we just had one strategy. We set up a little table in the middle of campus, and at lunchtime, we would talk to students, and we'd invite them to our Christian group. After 2 months, we had about 30 students. We were the only table out there. No one else set up any tables on campus, just one table, and we were out there. And one day, I get a call from the dean of students, and she says to me, by the way, there was a Senate meeting. I didn't even know that the university had a Senate, and 2 clubs brought an accusation against you on this obscure little thing about this thing. And she said, you have been permanently kicked off our campus for forever. Don't come back on. You're not allowed on. You're not an official club. You're done. Boom. And I was like, and she hangs up the phone. I tell you what, I almost went straight to the bathroom and threw up. It was so stressful. I'm like, I've given my whole life here. I moved down here. What did I do wrong? I had a friend who knew a lawyer. I called the lawyer. He's like, we'll write a letter. They write a letter. That scared the university. They're like, we'll have another little Senate meeting. So they had another Senate meeting. 30 students come into this meeting with me. There's this big furious debate. At the end of the debate, they're like, all right, we'll let you back on campus, but you can only be on campus on Mondays and Wednesdays, and the clubs that don't like you, they're gonna get Tuesdays and Thursdays and no one on Friday. And I can remember this kid in our ministry named Mike Herrera, on fire, awesome business guy, and he stood up and he said, no, this is America. We're all gonna be able to say what we all are gonna do and say. Monday through Friday, Saturdays and Sundays. And he held his ground. He wasn't obstinate, he wasn't argumentative, he wasn't mean-spirited. He's like, no, I want the atheists to have as much rights as we do. We're gonna hold our ground. And finally, they said, okay, we'll all just go out there. They had one little rule. The only little rule was, you can't use a table that you bring on campus by yourself. You have to use the university's table. And the university's table was like a half a mile from where the mall was, and it was these long, heavy, horrible tables. This is what bureaucracies do. We'll find a way to crush you one way or the other. So we're doing it. So we go over there, we get in the closet every day, and we take this, and there would take like 3 people to carry it. And sure enough, they never set up before, but that next Monday, the atheists right behind us. They're just walking right behind us. They set up right next to us. We're like, hi, I'm Kurt, hi, blah, blah. They got their pamphlets, we got our pamphlets. Students are coming by, God or no God, God or no God. And then after about a week, one of the atheist kids was like, I gotta leave early. I don't know what to do with this table. And we're like, oh, well, we'll put the table away for you. So we put the atheist table away one day. And then the next day, the atheist didn't show up to bring the table out. And the student of my ministry, Renee, said, what do you think we should do? I said, I don't know. She said, I think we should set their table up for them. I said, let's do it. So we grab their heavy old table. We get their box of pamphlets right there. We set it up. They show up about a half hour late, and they're like, who did this? I'm like, we did this. They're like, who's been manning the table? Like, we have. How many pamphlets you giving out? Like, it's like 10 people. We've been giving out all your atheist pamphlets. You're not telling people not to be an atheist. No, I think we won one over to atheism. I think we did. And, and they start laughing. So we start laughing. Next thing you know, we're sharing food. Next thing you know, they're like, hey, I got biology. Can you put the table away? Sure. Can you take it out? Sure. And we start just loving on them. And the vice president of the atheist group becomes a Christian. Bro, that started out as, I don't want to go on this walk. And it ended up with, as a 2-foot brown trout right under the roots right there. And it was the funnest thing in my life. It started as the most stressful, and it ended up being the funnest thing. Why? Because we responded to evil with good. We have what psychologists call a tendency for interpersonal victimhood. What does that mean? We're easily offended. That's what that means. We become victims quickly. And why is that important? Because that is a fertile environment for revenge to grow. And revenge is a bitter, tough old root. I used to have to row an acre in my mom's garden every summer before I could go have fun. And man, there's some weeds that just come up. They come up. But there's some of these grasses, and they get their roots around clumps of dirt, and you just getting them out. Does any gardeners know what I'm talking about? They break off, and you hurt your fingers, and then 2 days later, they're just grown back even more, and you feel like you're pruning them away that's making them grow more. That's our heart and revenge and offense. The smallest little things. I have bought my children all their phones and their watches and every device to which they communicate with other humans. I, Kurt Harlow, have purchased these things. And so when I call them and they do not immediately respond, does any parent know what I'm talking about? What does my little heart start saying? They don't appreciate me. You realize my salary comes from the fine, generous people of Bayside, and I have been tithing for years and giving to the poor and saving emergency funds, and out of all that budgeting, I came up with this little, well, of course, it was the 3 generations past of my phone that's got a screen crack, so let's not bring that up, but I gave you this phone, and you will not immediately respond to me. And then finally, they'll text you back, "Hi, Dad, I was at work, and I was writing a paper, and I was helping an old lady cross the street, doing all these Jesus-y things. I was at a soup kitchen." And in my brain, I'm creating, does anyone know what I'm talking about? I'm creating this narrative that they don't love me, and this is personal. My friend, beware revenge. Beware victimhood. Beware that bitterness. What's the key? What would happen if you responded with grace? So simple, so true, so powerful. God just asks you one thing. All you have to do is give grace to others in the way he has given grace to you. And then the second idea is this: love the hard to love. Jesus is saying we have to respond to evil with good, and we have to love the hard to love. There are 3 types of people that are hard to love in our life. First one is personal. This is individuals who push our buttons. If you have an individual in your life that pushes your button, raise your hand right now. And if you're a parent, keep it up. The second one is political. These are individuals who oppose our opinions. These are the people that tell us we're dumb for believing what we believe. And we often make that same mistake and tell them they're dumb back. And then there's a third level. It's not personal as much. It is personal, but it's more than that. It's not political, but it's more than that. It's past wounds. This is the dad-shaped heart and hole in my heart from when my biological father left. This is that breakup that was so horribly painful. This is that serious harm or hurt done by an authority figure. Do you have to love those enemies? Forgiveness is not. Let's talk about what forgiveness is not just for a minute. Forgiveness is not agreeing with or ignoring the harm that was done to you. Forgiveness is also, I've learned, not a one-time event. The amount of times I've said to God, please help me forgive this person. It's never just been one time in these deep hurts. And forgiveness is not, it doesn't mean forgetting. Forgive and forget is really actually what you need to do is you need to remember the lesson of what caused it. So when I ask people to forgive their enemies, and when Jesus asked them, even more important, he's not saying you have to agree with the enemy. He's not saying that you have to ignore what the enemy did. He's not saying that you have to forget. What is forgiveness then? It's releasing yourself from the job of punishing the offender. It's just that simple. You see, ultimately, theologically, we cannot believe this idea of love your enemies unless we believe that there is a just God who at the end of all things will make all things just. If I can't say, God, you're in charge of justice, I can't love enemies. But when I understand how reliable and truly just God is, I can forgive even the most offensive. What is forgiveness? It's releasing yourself from punishing the offender. It's learning to move forward with your life. It's not letting the thought of the offense control you now. If you don't walk in forgiveness, they are still winning. And finally, forgiveness is ending the cycle of victim to victimizer. You know, ultimately, my forgiveness for my biological father has to do with this. I don't want it to infect my children. I want this to be the end. I want this to be the general. You know, Kelly and I, the theme of our marriage is not we're the most romantic couple ever, or that we're the most cool couple ever. You know what we are? You know what the theme of our marriage is? It stops here. It stops here. The harm and damage that was done in her family of origin and my family of origin, it stops here. Not because we're better than our parents or friends or families or people we grew up with, but because Jesus. Here's the key. What would happen if you forgave those who hurt you? What would happen if you trusted Jesus to be the author of everything that needs to happen in their life? I actually think just theologically, you know what's happening in this passage is Jesus is talking about his own death here. So we often read it and we go, gosh, how can I forgive this person and that person? And we should say that. How can I overcome that offense? And we should say that. But if we only read it in that sense, we miss how prophetic and poetic it is. See, Jesus says this, if anyone slaps you, you know, they put a bag over Jesus' head and they beat him about the face. Why did they put the bag over his head? So he couldn't even flinch when the blows were coming. It wasn't just the right cheek or the left cheek, but it was his entire head. He says, Jesus, in this teaching, if anyone takes your shirt, they didn't just take his shirt or his tunic. Often when we portray Christ on the cross, we portray him with a little loincloth, but that's not the way it was. He was completely naked. They took every thread of his clothes. He says this, if they force you to walk a mile, Jesus walked that mile with the cross across his shoulders. And not only did he carry the weight of the cross, but when he got to the place of Golgotha, he carried the weight of our sin. Jesus says this, the one who wants to borrow from you, you give them all they ask. Jesus paid the price for our sin. The ultimate debt, he said, I'll give it all. I will cancel all of your debt. And then Jesus said this, pray for those who persecute you. After letting them beat him in the face, after stripping him naked and gambling for his clothes, after carrying the cross that extra mile, Jesus hung on that cross and he said, God, I pray, forgive them, Forgive them. I can forgive those who offend me because I was the enemy that Jesus forgave. I can forgive those that hurt me because I was the enemy that Jesus prayed for. Because I'm the one that he died on the cross for. Can I pray for you? Lord, I pray for that person right now that this is a challenging message for them because they have been wounded or hurt. God, what is the righteousness greater than the Pharisees? It's just you, Jesus. Let that person be comforted by the love of Jesus Christ. I pray for that place where there's broken relationship because hurt and offense. I pray for that place where there's been political discord. But mostly, God, I pray for that place where it's hard to love someone because they've hurt us. I pray that we would walk in true and liberating forgiveness. God, in the sunlight of your grace. I'm going to do something I normally don't do. I'm going to ask a slightly different question. Just every head bowed, no one looking around. I know sometimes we kid about that. Even online, right where you're at, I want you to stop. If you're here and there's someone that you need to turn the other cheek to, there's someone that has opposed you and you need to be praying for them, even carrying something an extra mile for them, and you need God's help to do that, I'm going to invite you just to lift your hand right now and say, yeah, Pastor Kurt, I need some prayer. Yeah, put it up. Don't be ashamed about it. Everyone will be in this situation at some point in their life. God, I pray, give them courage right now. Lord, we take these things, we take these relationships, we take these moments, we offer them to you in Jesus' name. Let a power of grace come into us. Soften our hearts, God. Let newness come into us. God, give us faith that you are the ultimate actor of justice, and we can trust you with all of our hurts and our harms. God, peace on that hurt, I pray. And I ask it in Jesus' name. And everyone said, amen.
Hey guys, Pastor Mark here, one of the senior pastors around here. So glad that you are actually part of Bayside Online. You really are part of our family. We have grown over the last couple of years online a ton, and we really do consider you as part of our church family. So what that means is make sure you subscribe and share this. It's great. But also get in a community group. Start watching the Bible study. Start being engaged. Even give. One of the ways that we can actually do online church and have this global community and even do the ministry of our campuses is by people partnering with us in the gospel, as Paul talks about in Philippians chapter 1. And that means by your resources, financially. There are people all over the world getting blessed through what we do at Bayside. And so obviously part of that is giving and using and stewarding that for the glory of God. So we're super thankful if you do that. We'd love you to start doing that, and just super thankful you're part of our church. So glad you're with us. Make sure that you let us know you're watching and part of this, because we want to get in touch with you and thank you and serve you any way we can. Anyway, thanks guys, and we will see you next week.